Hello and welcome back to Coding with T. In today's tutorial, we are going to talk about how we can create checkboxes in our data table, how we can create the pagination, sorting, search, and above all, we are going to create a reusable widget of our paginated data table so that we can easily use that widget inside our application without any hassle or without worrying about a lot of things that we are going to learn today. So we are trying to make things easier. In previous tutorial, we talked about what is data table, what is a table widget. We can use a table widget in a static mode, what is data table and how we can use the data table in Flutter to make our designs or make the content dynamically displayed inside our admin panel. Then we learn what is the difference between data table and data table 2 package that we used in the previous tutorial. And after that, we also learn the use of paginated data table and data table 2. So if you're new, you can watch the previous videos. Link is in the description. We are getting Flutter E-commerce Admin Panel and we are about to complete our table section, and from now onward we are going to completely focus on creating the admin panel. All the screens, everything will be started from the next tutorial onward, and we have almost covered all the basic concepts that require to create any type of admin panel. And if you complete it and reached till here, then I can say that now you can easily create any type of admin panels. You just have to use those concepts we learned in the previous tutorials and design any type of web apps. So let's get started with today's tutorial. Okay, so our application is running and this is what we are going to create. We are going to create a checkboxes. When you are going to click on them, all the checkboxes are selected. We can see any of these checkboxes by clicking on that row. We can toggle these checkboxes. You can see the sorting option, so we can sort our code or the checkboxes like this way. We can do the search for the ID, like let's say we're going to search for A7AB. So this is the ID. This is how we're going to search. You can see this table is a dynamic table and it is working on these 45 records. We can do this pagination. We can go to the last page if we want, come back to the first page. So these things that we are going to cover. So let's get started. We are inside our project, and in the previous tutorial we did see that inside our paginated data table 2 widget that we are using a package of data table 2, we created a show checkbox column value to true. We make it true, but instead of making this true, when I'm going to run this application, you can see we cannot see any checkboxes. So the first thing is how to create checkboxes for the single select or multi select inside our data table. So first of all, you have to make this show checkbox column to true. Once it's true, you can see we are inside the paginated data table. We have all the design properties over here. This one is also related to a functionality property, and we have created some columns. And for the rows, we have a source that we created in a separate class. This is a separate class extending with a data table source because this source is going to require data table source. So we created a class of type data table source, and in that we have 4 functions that we need to override. So this one is get row, then we have a row count approximate is a boolean, then we have a row count and selected row count. These 3 are very simple. Whatever rows we have, we will pass the length to row count. If it is approximated, then pass the true. If it is not, pass false. And a row is currently not selected, so simply it's 0. Now this get row was the main function as we talked about in the previous tutorial. This get row is going to create rows, as many rows as we are going to require inside this data list, and this is the index that will dynamically be incrementing one by one until the data has been completed. So for the dummy data, we created another controller class, a simple class with a simple variable. You can just create a simple variable as well right inside my data if you want to perform this example, but later on definitely we are going to fetch the data using the controller from database. But right now it's a simple empty variable, and whenever this class will be loaded, we are going to, in the onInit function, we are going to load all this dummy data over here. So this is the class that is going to act like a controller. We are going to add all the variables over here, and this one is the class of rows, and this one is our main design, which is the dashboard desktop screen. Currently it's not reusable widget, but later on definitely we're going to make it or convert it to reusable widget. So now let's come back to display the checkbox column. Once this is true, let's go to the row inside the data row 2. we have to press Control Space to see all the options. And inside we have a function of on tap, so that whenever the row will be tapped, you can see this is row. We're using data row. So whenever this row will be tapped, we want to trigger something. Currently nothing, but by creating this function, this means that it is not disabled, but it is enabled. And another function we have is a selected function. So whenever that row is selected, what you want to do, we want to create a variable and make that variable as selected. It is a bool, so let's for now make it true so that it is by default selected, or we can make it false. It is not yet dynamic. We are going to go for that as well. And the function on selected change. So whenever the select option is changed, this function is going to be triggered. So these are the three main functions for the row. There are other functions as well. Let's say on double tap, on long press, on secondary tab, on secondary tab down. So you can work on those functions as well. On selected change is going to give us a new value, and definitely it's a function. This selected means that whether this current row at this index is selected or not. So currently it's false, but whenever this on selected change will return us true, we are going to make the current index value to true, and we will also assign that true to this selected, but we will come back to that. Now, first of all, let's see if there is any change. Yes, you can see the checkboxes. Currently we cannot trigger any change to it, but you can see on hover these rows are being changed, and we can also click on them. I have added a print statement to see if the row is being selected or not. So let's save it. Let's open the code, and when we are going to tap on this, you can see row 1 is clicked. Then let's say click on the 6th row 6 is clicked, and like this row 10 is clicked. So this is how you can handle the tap events, but yet we have to make this selected and on selected change so that we can make the selected to true or false. And let's say by default we are going to make it true. Let's save it, and you can see we can although not change them yet, but all the rows are by default selected. So now in order to make it dynamic, let's assume this is the official dashboard controller that we are going to use to create our variables, and definitely to do the change inside our data. So this is the data list. Inside this we are going to create a list of type booleans. So you can see it is a list of type bool. It is going to check that if current row is selected or not, and it is type of rx because we are using getx state management. And definitely this empty list is a type of bool with the .obs to make it dynamic. So now whenever there is change inside the selected rows, we can easily redraw our design, because remember we are not going to go for the static, and whenever there is a checkbox triggered, this means that we have to redraw the design. And for the redraw, either we have to call the set state and create our design in the stateful widget, or we are going to use the stateless widget with the getx features like this one. So now this is going to check whether there is any change in the selected rows, and if there is any change, design should automatically redraw itself. Now you have to generate list of booleans. Whenever this list will be initialized, we can again create selected rows dot assign all, and like this one we're going to simply generate 36 elements in this row, in this list, and all the elements will be false. This means by default selected rows will be 36, but all selected rows will be false by default. Okay, now we have the selected rows, all the rows are created and all the rows are false. Now we can head towards our row, and in here we can change this true to call the controller. You can see this is a controller of dashboard controller. So we are using this controller, which is going to call this class. So controller dot selected rows, and whatever the result of selected rows at this index, either it's true or false, should be assigned to the selected. So this is the index that we are going to use. Now we are going to call this function, and using fat arrows we are going to assign controller dot selected rows at current index. Whenever this on select change method will be called, this means that if it was not selected, now user select it or admin select it, and this value is going to be changed. So whatever the value of this value, we will assign this to this index. So it can be null value. So if it is null, this double question mark means if it is null, we are going to assign false so that it is not selected. Now let's save it. In here you can see we can still not able to select any of these, and the reason is that this selected rows is working very fine, but we also have to redraw our table which is created inside our design, not inside the rows, but inside our design. We have to redraw this table in order to get the new selected row, right? So to do that, we are going to simply wrap this widget with the obx widget, and it will be treated as a function in which we are going to return a widget of this paginated data table, and here it is going to end, create a function. Now you can see it is a function, and in the obx we must have to return some widget. So this time the widget is a table. Okay, inside this function, whenever we are going to now trigger it, this obx is going to draw this or redraw this paginated data table whenever there is change inside its source. So in the source, the change will be only inside the selected rows, and now whenever there is change inside it, it is going to redraw the state. So let's save it. And now inside, when I'm going to select this, you can see the state is being changed and the table is being redraw itself, or the rows will be redrawn, and the checkbox will display as selected or unselected. We can select all of them. We can go to the next line. We can select these values as well. We can again go back and rest of these values are selected. So this is how we can create the selected and unselected. So now based on these selected options, let's say we have a selected rows over here, and with these selected rows we can easily perform any operation or any bulk activity that we want to perform on selected activities. You can create your own buttons next to it, and you have your selected rows, and based on those rows you can easily extract data from this list and do whatever you want. You can trash them, you can hide them, you can do anything. So the next thing is the pagination, because we are using the paginated data table. So in this way, pagination is by default enabled, but in order to enhance the pagination, we have another feature, which is when we're going to add this show first and last buttons to true. And if you save the code, you can see we have the first page button over here and the last page button. When I'm going to trigger this, you can see we are in the last page and we have some other empty checkboxes, because in one page we're displaying the 10 records. So we are going to come back to this as well. And we have three more functions, or the three more features. The first one is a function on page change. If you hover over this, you can see invoked when the user switches to another page. This means that whenever the page is going to be triggered, you can call this function or use this function. Okay, and here you can see when I'm going to click on this next page, that function is going to be triggered. And on this next page click, you can fetch data for the next page. You can save the reads using Firestore database. So this is very helpful if you are going to use this. Then you can see now we have enabled rows per page. Currently it's 10 to 20. Whenever you are going to trigger this, it is going to display the rest of data and automatically going to add a dynamic view with a scroll bar, so that you can display all the 20 records in this manner. That button is enabled using this function, which is on rows per page changed, and this is the number of rows that user is going to select and display. You can use your own values as well, and whenever this number is going to be triggered, again you can fetch additional record from the database based on this number. So then we have the last boolean, which is render empty rows in the end. So if you want to make it true, this will fetch or place all the empty rows at the end of the table, no matter what type of table you have created. So this was for the pagination. This is very helpful. Believe me, if you're working with the Firebase and you have large database and you want to avoid or reduce the number of reads and writes, then using these two functions on page change and getting the data only which is required will save you a lot of cost and time, and definitely increase the speed. Okay, and the next thing is to talk about the sorting. For the sorting, we have sort ascending option. So first of all, let's say we have sort arrow always visible, sort arrow animation duration, sort arrow builder, sort arrow icon, and sort ascending. So let's say we're going to go for first one, which is sort ascending. It's a boolean, make it true. Then we have sort arrow always visible. Let's also make this true. Let's see if there is any change, and we cannot see anything like sorting. And one more thing over here before going to go for the sorting, you might be going to ask a lot of questions about it. The thing came into my mind is, as you can see, the background color is not white, it is also not transparent. And if you want to try to change the background color, it's not that easy in the paginated data table. So To change the background color of this paginated data table, you have to wrap this with the theme widget, right? So using this theme widget, we're going to use the data property of this theme, because otherwise it is going to give us an error. And using the copy with means use all the theme that is already there, but just change the card theme like this and change the color to white with the elevation 0. So let's save this. And now you can see we have the white background color and the hover is same like the background. You can change this as well. You can add anything other if you want. Okay, now back to sorting. So we have sort arrow icon. Let's say I've added some random icon to test if it is working or not, and still you cannot see anything like sorting. So let's go back. So now for the functionality, we have to use this sort column index. This means that which column is going to be sorted. So this is what we have to provide dynamically, but right now let's make it 1. The first column is going to be sorted, and if we scroll a bit down, this is the first column, or this is the index 1. The first one is the index 0. Let's say we're going to call the onSort property, because without this sort is not going to work. We have to tell this widget that which column will be sorted. So we have to use this onSort function. It is a function which are going to use two things. The first one is the column index, which is what is the column index of this one, and if it is ascending or descending sort. Remove this constant, add constant where required. Now let's save it. Currently it's not going to sort because this function is empty, but you can see the default icon that we added is right over here. Currently it's not sorting, but we can see the icon. Now to sort it, I'm going to call another function which we will create in the controller. So we first have to also create the controller dot, let's say the name of the function is sort by id. You can name it anything, and we're going to pass this column index to this function and also this ascending boolean variable to this index over here. Now we have to use this same controller. We can call it inside the build method, and now this controller is accessible, but this function is not created. So let's go to controller. This is the dashboard controller, and inside we're going to create a function sort by id. It is going to receive the integer, which is the column index, and boolean variable for ascending or descending sort. And like the selected rows, we have to create now two variables. The first variable is the sort column index, which is by default 1, and again it is a type of rx or .obs. So there whenever there is change in the sort, it can automatically redraw our table. And also we have the sort ascending boolean variable. It is again rx or the type of obs, which is by default true, so that we can have the ascending sort by default. So first of all, we're going to use the sort ascending value and assign it to this variable or this boolean variable. If user press the button and it is ascending false, this means it is a descending sort. Then sort ascending will be false again, and if it is true, the sort ascending will be true. We will assign these variables in few minutes, but first we have to add the functionality. Now we have to call the data, which is a data list dot sort property. In the sort we have two things, the first value and the second value. Based on these values we are going to sort, and it is a function. So we have to check if ascending is true. Then we want to return, we're going to use the data list at 0 index. Currently we are working with the static values. So at 0 index we have a column 1 dot toString dot to lowercase. Basically we're going to compare this with the rest of these values. When we're going to work with the models, with the real data, you will easily understand this. Currently it's making a bit of difficult for you to understand, but so if it is ascending, I'm going to add it like this. It is not going to work exactly it should be, because this return is not something obvious, because we are not using a model and we are using this dummy data, which is a pair of JSON. And in the else, if it is not ascending, we are going to return the vice versa of this, but I'm going to return as it is so that we cannot see any error. And then the important part is to use the sort column index and assign this current index to the sort column index. So we have sort ascending value assigned, we have sort column value assigned, and also the data list is kind of now sorted. It is also not sorted, but we are assuming that it is sorted. So now once we have this function, we will go to our widget, and in here in the sort ascending, instead of static, we are going to assign controller dot sort ascending. If it is true, a true will be assigned. If it is false, false will be assigned. dot value will get the true or false. And then we have this column index. Again, use controller dot sort column index dot value. This is going to assign the sorted column index value to this paginated data table, and it will know based on these two values that if it is ascending sort or descending sort and which column it needs to be sorted, right? So currently we have only sort enabled for this function, but I'm going to copy this exactly same for the last one and remove this constant. Now let's save it, and you can see currently I'm sorting it and it's kind of something being sorted. Now the 12 is at the top, and when I'm going to press it again, the one data 1 is at the top, and same way we can sort the column 2. Now in order to change these icons, which is only available in this widget of data table 2, we can use easily property of sort arrow builder, and in that sort arrow builder we can use two things, ascending and sorted. So these are two boolean variables that we receive. So whenever the sort icon will be pressed, if it is sorted, the first thing we're going to check if this sorted value is true. This means that the specific column is being sorted. Then we're going to check if it is ascending or not, and if it is ascending, we are using this library icons x for the icons. If it is ascending, we are going to display this icon. If it is descending, we are going to display the down icon, up and down, and size will be icon small size, which is in the T sizes, and it is 16.0. You can assign any other size. And if it is not sorted, simply we're going to assign this arrow. So let's save it. And now you can see currently this one is sorted as ascending. We can change it to descending sort. And also this one is not selected but sortable. So that's why we can see two arrows. But when I'm going to click on this, you can see now this one is ascending, this one is sorted, but this column is sortable but not being sorted, right? So ascending and descending, we can change these icons and also these icons. So that's it for the sorting. Now the last thing but not the least, we have to create a reusable widget as well. So before that, we are going to create the search, and to create a search, we do not have to add anything, or there is no feature for this paginated data table, but we simply have to create our own search. That's very easy. On top of this data table widget, on top of this OBX widget, I am going to create a column, and inside this column we are going to add a text field, text form field, and then we have a size box to add space between the table and a text form field. We are going to redesign this in the next video when we are going to design our first official table. We are going to fetch data from database and we are going to use this table. At that time, we are going to create a separate header, and we will keep using that practice inside our tables. But for now, create a text form field and design it as you like. Inside, we have to create a controller, and to change the or to get the change value of this text form field, we have to get the controller, because we are using the controller of this dashboard. And in that, like these other variables, I have created a search text editing controller, name it search text controller, and we're going to assign this to our design using the controller dot search text controller, so that whenever there is change inside the search text controller, we can get it with this one. And we're going to get the function on change. Whenever there is change, we are going to trigger this text form field. You can create a button instead of on change. You can use a button to trigger this search function. So whenever there is change, we are going to call this pass whatever is inside this text form controller to a function which is going to create a search query. So let's copy this and create it inside our dashboard controller. Search query, it is going to receive a string. I'm going to call it a query, and inside we are going to filter our data list dot assign all. We're going to assign a new list to this one, and before assigning this, we have to use two lists. The one will contain all the data and the other one which will be sorted, right? Because we are using this data list on all the places, so we are going to use this data list as a sorted data list. So let's refactor this name to, sorry, it's filtered data list, not sorted data list. And same this one, I'm going to create a simple data list. This data list will always holding all the data, whereas this filter data list will be assigned as a few data. Whenever there is search, let's say we search something like football, then we have 15 records, and in the data list we have 1000 records. So all the 1000 records will remain in the data list, but filter data list will contain 50. And after football, let's say we're going to search for the cricket, then in the cricket we have 32 records, then we are going to assign 32 records to this filter data list. So this filter data list is going to be changed, and we have to use this filter data list everywhere. But this data list will keep on holding all the actual records so that we cannot miss it, right? So filter data list dot assign all. So first we have to do the same for our data list. So the data list and filter data list should have the same data. Okay, now we have to change this filter data list based on this query. So we are going to call the data list dot where, and inside the where we are going to receive some item or some value. Let's say we have item dot, it is, because it is again a map, not a model. On the model we can easily query, believe me, but in here we do not have any specific values, so we have to go for something like this. So we're going to check that if item at column 1, because it is a map, so we have to provide the key. If at this key contains the query we receive into lowercase, and if this statement is going to be matched, then the data list will be used this where clause and assign all the data to this filter data list, and that filter data list is being used inside our table. Because it is a type of OBS, this means that it should automatically redraw itself. So let's save it. Okay, now you cannot see the data, but we have a search over here. It is not working because our design crashed. The reason is, if you hover over the top, and you can see we're using column, because column do not have specific height, and also this paginated data table do not have a specific height. So to make it work, we have to provide something like size box for this paginated data to keep the specific height. So I'm going to wrap this theme with a size box. You can change the height, but I'm going to give the height as 760. Now save it, and you can see the table is back. It is working now. Now let's try to search something. Nothing is being changed, and the reason, or the possible reason, is that we are not using the filter data list at the top, because this OBX is not going to get that list inside its function, so it does not know whether it is going to be changed or not. So let's try to, okay, I've added a visibility, visible to false, so that we cannot see it. But for the OBX, because whenever there is filter data list, and whenever the filter data list is going to be redraw itself or change itself, the length of this filter data list will be changed. The size box or this paginated data table should redraw itself and display us the record that is visible. So now let's save it. Now we are going to write something like data, and all the data is gone. This means it is working, but the logic that we added inside the search is not properly working because of that JSON structure. So in the models, we are definitely going to use the same thing, or this same function, the same thing, but instead of these item of column 1, we will be using our models or the real-time data that we're going to talk about in the next section. Now onwards, everything will be start getting the real data from the database. So we have this controller, we have this my data, but instead of creating this complete thing, including the visibility, OBX, size box, the theme, all the design, all these values again and again, what we can do is, or the good thing that we can do to avoid using or writing all this code again and again, we can create a reusable widget. So to create reusable widget, I'm going to go for the common widgets, because it will be usable throughout in other screens. I'm going to create this data table, and inside this paginated data table, I have added all the code that is required and added some of the values over here. You can see we have sort ascending. The default values are assigned, minimum width is assigned, sort ascending, data row height, table height, rows per page. These values are assigned, but over here you can see we have columns and source that we can pass from there. So for the columns, we have list of data column, and for the source, we have data table source. So once we have all these variables, we can assign all these values dynamically. Like over here, I have assigned, we can change this material state property to widget state property because it is now changed. And over here we have an empty widget, which is a T animation loader, which is the empty animation class we created while creating our app design. We created this animation loader class, and this is an empty file using lottie animations. We're going to pass the animation that we want to display, and the rest is the design. So we're going to use this animation loader to pass our own animation. We have a text, nothing found, height and width is passed. It's going to create an empty animation for us. We have the sort arrow, heading, row decoration, and rest of the things are created. So I have also did the distribution like we did previously, so that you can easily understand what's going on here. Okay, so once this widget is created, let's close it. Instead of this paginated data table, we can call paginated data table, and in that we do not need the column spacing. We have also defined all these styles over there, so this is gone. Checkbox column is also gone. Pagination values are not needed here. If you want to use these values, you can use it, but we do not need it. So the thing we are going to use over here is the sort ascending, sort column index, the columns, and the main thing is the source. So now onward, we just have to use, also we do not need to use the theme and the size box as well. We just need the OBX and whatever we want to filter, and the columns, the main source, and if there is anything we want to use other than the default values. And definitely we need the data source for each of the design, and this will be our dashboard controller. In the next tutorials, we are also going to, you can see we have this data list. We will have the filter data list. We have selected rows, sort column index, sort ascending, search controller, the sort function, the search query, and bunch of other functions that will be repeating again and again inside this controller. And let's say we have the dashboard controller, then we have orders controller, banners, brands, categories, whatever we have, all these things will be using this same functions and variables again and again. So instead of repeating it, we are going to go for something very beautiful. We are going to create one single class, a base class. That base class is going to override all these things. So we just have to create one single class that is going to handle all these things dynamically for all different type of classes. So that will be coming in the upcoming tutorial. So make sure to stay tuned, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can ask me down below in the comments. And here is the reusable widget. It's working exactly same as we are working before. Let's display it to 20 records. We can scroll it. So that's it for today's tutorial. Thank you for watching. Take care.